The moment. There is a heavy weather moving across the celestial map on this mid-June day in Kinshasa, the kind that doesn't just bring rain, but brings a reckoning. When we cast the chart for the moment, news breaks of the tragedy at the displacement camp. 30 dead, the shadow of Ebola lengthening. The sky is crowded with mixed messages. The sun is high in the sky at the mid-heaven, tightly conjunct the point of public visibility and government authority. This tells us immediately that this is not a footnote. It is a headline, a moment where the eyes of the world and the eyes of the state are forced to look directly at a wound. In Gemini, the sign of the messenger, the news travels fast, scattering information before the full picture is even clear. Yet, the atmosphere is restless. The cyclic index sits at 807 and is climbing, meaning we are in a period of dispersal and high tension. The pot is boiling, not settling. The moon is in Leo, fixed and proud, sitting in the 12th house of the unconscious and hidden enemies. This suggests a deep emotional undercurrent, a sense of national pride wounded, or a hidden actor striking at the vulnerable. The violence here, with Mars in Taurus in the 8th house of death and resources, is slow, stubborn, and rooted in the material struggle for land and survival. It isn't a flash in the pan, it is the grinding pressure of conflict meeting the fragility of a displacement camp. Most striking is Jupiter sitting right on the ascendant in Cancer, separated by less than a degree. Jupiter expands whatever it touches, and in Cancer, the sign of home and shelter, its presence on the horizon of this event chart signals a massive humanitarian overflow. It is the image of too many people seeking safety, the camps overwhelmed, and the sheer scale of the need outstripping the ability to contain it. Tarot imagery drawn alongside this chart suggests the Five of Cups, grief over what is lost, yet a shadow of a threat. Ebola creeping in like the Tower card waiting to fall. What it touches. To understand why this specific tragedy has unfolded now, we must look at how these wandering lights touch the soul of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The DRC's chart, born at independence in 1960, is currently under a profound and invisible siege. The dominant signature is the meeting point of Neptune and the nation's natal Pluto. Neptune is the planet of fog, sickness, and dissolution, while Pluto is the ruler of the underworld, deep power, and transformation. A quincunx between them is an aspect of adjustment and unavoidable strain. Mondanly, this translates to the state's authority and infrastructure being deeply eroded by an invisible enemy, Ebola. It is a crisis that cannot be shot down with guns. It requires a complete restructuring of how health and safety are managed, but the alignment creates a blind spot. The fog is thick, and the reaction is likely too slow or misdirected. Simultaneously, Uranus in the sky is in a tight square to the DRC's Pluto. Uranus brings shock, rebellion, and sudden upheaval. Where Neptune brings the creeping biological threat, Uranus brings the sudden violence of the attack on the camp. This square creates a volatile pressure cooker, where rebel factions or sudden sparks of violence directly challenge the state's survival mechanisms. The displacement camp, a liminal space of vulnerability, becomes the flashpoint where these two forces, the shock of violence and the creep of disease, collide. When we look at how the world chart relates to the DRC specifically, the picture sharpens. The DRC's Mars, its drive and military force, sits in direct opposition to the world's moon. This is a classic signature of collective emotional distress, focused on a region of conflict. The world feels this violence deeply. It stirs the global gut. Furthermore, the DRC's Neptune conjuncts the world's moon. The suffering of the Congolese people, the sickness, the displacement, the confusion, is not localized. It tugs at the emotional fabric of the global community. This synastry suggests that international response will be driven more by emotional reaction and images of suffering than by cold strategic calculation in the coming weeks. How it rolls forward. Looking down the road from this turning point, the astrological weather suggests the situation will not resolve quickly. Rather, it will deepen and transform. We are approaching a powerful total solar eclipse in Leo on August 12th. Eclipses act as wildcards, obscuring the light and then revealing a new reality. In Leo, this eclipse will spotlight leadership, the heart of the nation, and the dignity of the people. It suggests a potential crisis of governance regarding how these camps and the health crisis are managed. If the leadership has been asleep at the wheel, the eclipse will likely jerk them awake, often through a sudden scandal or a reshuffling of power. Before that eclipse hits, however, the month of July brings a series of heavy outer planet aspects that rewrite the rules of the game. Uranus forms a trine to Pluto, and Jupiter opposes Pluto. These are massive generational signatures, speaking of power struggles, the exposure of deep corruption, and the fight for control over resources. Between the reported violence at the camp and the eclipse, we can expect a push for reform or a violent restructuring of how aid and security are distributed in the region. The conflict is likely to escalate or shift tactics, becoming more technologically advanced or unconventional. The Jupiter trine Neptune aspect in late July offers a slim window of hope, a wave of compassion, and perhaps a spiritual or ideological movement that attempts to heal the breach. It might manifest as a significant influx of international aid or a new approach to containing the Ebola threat. But given the opposition to Pluto, there will be a fight over who controls that aid and where it actually goes. The world is likely to step in, driven by that emotional synastry we saw earlier, but the implementation on the ground will face Pluto-level obstacles, bureaucracy, corruption, and power struggles. Watch for the period immediately following the Leo eclipse in August. Whatever has been hidden, whether it is the true extent of the Ebola spread or the political machinations allowing the camps to be targeted, will be forced into the light. The narrative will shift from the immediate tragedy to the systemic failures that allowed it to happen. Summary: the astrology of this event paints a picture of a nation caught between the grinding shock of violence and the eroding tide of disease, forcing a confrontation with deep structural vulnerabilities. First, we see an escalation of rebel violence as Uranus squares the DRC's natal Pluto, bringing sudden shocks to the nation's power structures and challenging the government's ability to protect vulnerable areas like displacement camps. Second, a deepening health crisis is signaled by Neptune's quincunx to the DRC's Pluto, indicating that the Ebola threat will exploit systemic weaknesses and require a radical overhaul of the health apparatus rather than superficial fixes. Third, we observe a humanitarian overwhelm, reflected by Jupiter's conjunction with the event ascendant, suggesting that the scale of need in the camps will quickly outstrip available resources, triggering a massive but chaotic international response. Fourth, a crisis of leadership is emerging around the total solar eclipse in Leo on August 12th, which will likely expose governance failures regarding the protection of civilians and the management of the crisis. Finally, we anticipate a global emotional mobilization driven by the synastry between the DRC and the world charts, ensuring that this tragedy remains a focal point of international concern and demands for accountability. This is a story of a pressure being released, but in a way that changes the shape of the vessel holding it. The landscape of the DRC's security and public health will look different in a year's time. Before you go, I know that news of this magnitude, of lives lost to violence and the creeping of sickness, settles heavy in the spirit, making our own skies feel restless. To help you navigate these turbulent times, the monthly transit forecast can offer you a personal map of the weeks ahead, highlighting where you might find shelter or face challenges amidst the global noise. And if you find this tragedy stirring up difficult emotions or a sense of helplessness, a tarot standard 4 to 9 cards reading using the shadow work spread can help you acknowledge that grief and uncover the hidden strength waiting in the dark. Both are here at Occultique, ready to offer you some guidance when you need it.